Here are the stories shaping the world this morning and why they matter.
Human rights concerns are growing around U.S. immigration enforcement and detention policies under the Trump administration, with Human Rights Watch investigations cited in an interview alleging serious abuses at several points in the system. The discussion focused first on Fort Bliss in Texas, described as the largest ICE detention center, where detainees were alleged to have faced beatings by masked agents, denial of hygiene, limited or no outdoor access, degrading bathroom conditions, and at least one suspicious death. The interviewee said the facility should be closed and independently investigated. The allegations go beyond one site. The interview described ICE actions in Minnesota as tactics meant not only to detain individuals, but to frighten a wider community. It also raised serious claims about migrant transfers abroad. Venezuelan migrants were said to have been picked up in the United States and sent to a prison in El Salvador, where the interviewee alleged torture and sexual abuse. Colombian migrants were described as being sent to Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of the Congo after being detained by ICE, leaving them near the airport without passports, without French language ability, and with unclear legal options. For migrants and their families, these policies can mean separation, fear, and a loss of access to lawyers, documents, and basic support. For communities, they raise broader questions about due process, executive power, and whether democratic checks are strong enough when enforcement expands rapidly. The interview also criticized U.S. pressure on international legal institutions, including the International Criminal Court. Marco Rubio was quoted as saying, "It was now a goal of U.S. foreign policy to dismantle the court." Human rights advocates argue that attacks on accountability institutions can make it harder to investigate alleged crimes anywhere, including by powerful governments. At the same time, activists, journalists, lawyers, and community groups were described as continuing to push back, documenting abuses and pressing for oversight.
In the occupied West Bank, several Palestinian homes in Qusra have been blockaded by Israeli settlers for a week, according to residents, leaving families unable to freely leave, receive visitors, or reliably restore basic services. Residents said they had been under siege for 7 days, with settlers accused of cutting water and electricity to some homes. The Israeli army deployed after international outcry and pressure from Washington, but residents said soldiers had not stopped the settler attacks or restored access. One resident said 40 to 50 armed men attacked people who tried to repair water and electricity lines while they were accompanied by the army. Supplies were said to be running low, and residents described fear that resisting could lead to arrest or interrogation. A wall outside one home reportedly bore Hebrew graffiti reading, "Death to Arabs." For the families inside those homes, the crisis is immediate: water, electricity, food, movement, and safety. For the wider West Bank, it reflects a pattern in which settler violence and the expansion of outposts deepen insecurity for Palestinian communities. Settlements in occupied territory are widely considered illegal under international law, and many outposts also violate Israeli law, though Israel has often legalized them retroactively. The political backdrop is also shifting. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz announced a plan to transfer some army duties in the West Bank to Israeli police, a move described by critics as part of a broader push toward annexation. Human rights groups have long warned that transferring more civilian policing powers to Israeli authorities in occupied territory could further entrench unequal legal systems for Palestinians and Israeli settlers. The immediate question in Qusra remains whether residents can regain safe access to their homes, services, and visitors without facing further attacks. In Lebanon, Israeli airstrikes in the south killed 11 people on Saturday, making it one of the deadliest days since a truce between the two countries took effect in June. Lebanon's health ministry said 7 people, including 3 children, were killed when a home on the edge of Ansar village was destroyed. A separate strike in Deir al-Zarani killed 4 people. Lebanon's prime minister criticized the attacks, saying they intimidate residents in their homes and undermine efforts to stabilize the south. The truce was meant to reduce violence along the border and allow people on both sides to move toward a more predictable daily life. But for families in southern Lebanon, the latest strikes bring renewed grief and uncertainty, especially in villages where homes, farms, and local businesses are closely tied to whether residents feel safe enough to stay. The deaths of 3 children in Ansar have intensified concern about civilian harm. Lebanese officials said the attacks weakened stabilization efforts at a time when many communities are trying to recover from repeated rounds of conflict. The broader challenge is that even when formal truces are in place, repeated strikes can prevent displaced people from returning, disrupt schools and work, and leave families living with the fear that any quiet period may be temporary.
In Indonesia, a deadly magnitude 7.7 earthquake struck the eastern Flores region early Saturday, damaging buildings and forcing hospital patients into makeshift tents. The epicenter was about 68 kilometers northwest of Ende in East Nusa Tenggara province. Authorities said dozens of people were injured, and officials warned the death toll would likely rise because landslides had cut off remote villages. At one hospital, walls collapsed, supplies and medicines were scattered, and patients had to be moved outside into tents in cold and rainy conditions. That kind of disruption is especially dangerous after a major quake, when hospitals must treat trauma injuries while also protecting patients who were already ill, elderly, pregnant, or recovering from surgery. The geography makes the response harder. East Nusa Tenggara is made up of many islands, and roads in mountainous areas can be blocked by landslides, making it difficult to move rescue teams, medical workers, clean water, and food. For families in remote villages, the first hours and days after a disaster can depend on whether neighbours, local officials, and emergency crews can reach each other. 2 additional earthquakes also struck Western Sumatra Island, adding to concerns across a country that sits on one of the world's most active seismic zones. Indonesia has extensive disaster response experience, but large quakes still expose the vulnerability of rural communities, hospitals, and transport networks. The priority now is search and rescue, restoring access to isolated areas, and getting medical care and basic supplies to people who may have been cut off since the early morning shaking.
Across parts of Europe, wildfires have forced evacuations as high temperatures and drought leave forests and fields dangerously dry. Fires were reported in eastern Belgium, Germany, and France's Landes region, where firefighters said one blaze had stopped spreading but was not yet under control. In eastern Belgium, evacuations were underway after a fire burned through about 3,000 hectares. Near the Belgian border in Germany, around 1,400 firefighters were battling another wildfire. In France's Landes region, another 100 residents and holidaymakers were evacuated on Saturday after a fire burned through 1,700 hectares of forest since Thursday. About 550 firefighters were working on the ground there with military support, while aircraft including Canadair and Dash planes dropped water and fire retardant. Officials in Landes said the fire had stopped advancing, which is a significant step, but they cautioned that it was still not under control. Residents were told they could return only once roads and homes were safe. That matters because after flames pass through an area, risks can remain. Falling trees, damaged power lines, smoke, unstable structures, and flare-ups when winds shift. For people forced out of their homes or holiday lodging, the immediate strain is practical as well as emotional. Finding shelter, medicines, documents, transport, and reliable information. For firefighters and emergency crews, extreme heat adds physical risk and makes long operations harder. The constructive response is visible in the scale of coordination. Local firefighters, national resources, military support, and aerial crews working together to protect communities and contain the fires before more homes are lost.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is questioning whether a June memorandum of understanding with the United States still reflects the current situation. That memorandum set a 60-day window for negotiations aimed at reaching a final agreement to end fighting. But the sides remain far apart while the United States maintains a naval blockade of Iranian ports. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance initially said the 60-day period began on June 18th, putting the deadline on Sunday. Araghchi pushed back on the premise, saying, "We have never had a ceasefire that would now need to be extended." He also said no decision had been made on whether to resume negotiations with the United States. The military pressure remains significant. U.S. Central Command said Admiral Brad Cooper visited the USS Abraham Lincoln on Saturday. The aircraft carrier has been deployed in the Middle East since January and is taking part in the blockade. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said the Navy can maintain the blockade indefinitely. Some reports have said troops involved in the operation are suffering mental fatigue. For ordinary people, the stakes are not abstract. A blockade can affect shipping, prices, fuel, medicine, and the flow of goods that businesses and families rely on. For sailors and service members, an open-ended deployment brings stress, long separation from families, and the risk that a miscalculation could escalate. Diplomacy remains the path with the greatest chance of reducing harm, but the latest comments suggest the timeline and even the terms of discussion are now disputed.
Ukraine says it struck Russian space and missile-linked assets from Friday through Saturday, including a plant producing rockets used to launch communication satellites and an airfield used by MiG-31 fighter jets capable of carrying hypersonic missiles. Kyiv also said it hit a Russian drone depot and command posts in Ukrainian regions under Moscow's control. The attacks come as Ukraine faces shortages of interceptors against Russian ballistic missile strikes. Russia's missile campaign has placed heavy pressure on Ukraine's air defenses, especially around cities, power infrastructure, and civilian sites where families depend on warning systems and shelters. When interceptors run low, the risk to apartment blocks, hospitals, energy facilities, and schools rises sharply. President Volodymyr Zelensky again emphasized Ukraine's desire to begin licensed production of interceptor missiles for the US-made Patriot air defense system. In July, President Donald Trump told Zelensky the United States would grant the license, but later expressed hesitation. For Ukraine, local production could make air defense more sustainable over time, reducing dependence on irregular deliveries and helping protect civilians through longer periods of war. The strikes on Russian missile-linked targets show Ukraine trying to reduce the threat at its source, not only intercept incoming weapons after launch. But the broader issue remains capacity, whether Ukraine can build or receive enough air defenses to protect ordinary people from repeated ballistic missile attacks. The humanitarian impact is measured not only in battlefield terms, but in whether children can sleep through the night, workers can keep power running, and families can remain in their homes.
In India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi used an Independence Day ceremony in New Delhi on Saturday to focus on young people, jobs, education, and national development. He said India aims to become a developed nation by 2047, when it marks 100 years of independence. Modi announced that the government would provide free online coaching for young people preparing for various examinations. He said the program would ease the economic burden on exam candidates and their families. That burden can be substantial in India, where competitive exams often shape access to government jobs, universities, and professional careers, and where families may spend heavily on private coaching. He also said the government had decided to train 10 million young people in artificial intelligence skills within the next year. The promise reflects both opportunity and anxiety. Artificial intelligence is creating new kinds of work, but it is also raising concerns about whether young people will have the training needed to compete in a changing economy. The speech followed large protests across India last month after authorities scrapped medical school entrance exam results over suspected paper leaks. Those protests exposed frustration among students who spend years preparing for high-stakes tests, often with major financial sacrifice from their families. For them, fairness in exams is not just an administrative issue, it can determine a future career. The new education and AI training announcements appear aimed at responding to those frustrations. The challenge will be implementation, making sure free coaching reaches students outside major cities, that AI training is practical and credible, and that exam systems are transparent enough for young people to trust.
In Hungary, a Polish tourist bus traveling from Serbia to Poland crashed overnight on the M3 motorway, killing at least a dozen people and critically injuring nearly a dozen more. The bus veered off the road and ended up in a ditch. Polish officials said investigators believe the driver may have fallen asleep. The crash is being described as Hungary's worst road accident since 2003, when a train hit a German tourist bus and killed 33 people. For the families of those killed and injured, the news brings a sudden and devastating loss during what was supposed to be a journey home. Survivors now face medical treatment, trauma, and the difficulty of contacting relatives across borders. Investigators will look at the condition of the vehicle, the driver's schedule, rest periods, road conditions, and whether fatigue played a role. Long-distance bus travel is common across Europe because it is relatively affordable, especially for tourists, workers, students, and families. That makes safety rules around driver rest, vehicle maintenance, and emergency response especially important. Polish and Hungarian authorities are expected to coordinate on identifying victims, supporting survivors, and informing families. Beyond the immediate investigation, the crash is a reminder that road safety depends not only on individual drivers, but on systems that prevent exhaustion, enforce standards, and protect passengers who may have little control over the conditions of their journey.
In Japan, record-breaking torrential rain in Chiba Prefecture east of Tokyo left 10 people dead and revealed a danger that can be easy to miss: gentle slopes that become powerful channels for floodwater. Natural hazards expert Motoyuki Ushiyama, a professor at Shizuoka University's Center for Integrated Research and Education of Natural Hazards, surveyed the area where a taxi passenger died after the vehicle was swept away. The area appeared almost flat, but Ushiyama found a 2-meter drop over 120 meters between rice paddies. He said overflow from a nearby river and rainwater from surrounding areas likely rushed onto the slope with enough force to carry vehicles away. His warning is important because people often recognize the danger of steep hills, rivers, and low underpasses, but may underestimate fields, farm roads, and neighborhoods that look level in normal weather. For residents, the lesson is practical. Hazard maps can show flood zones, landslide risks, and drainage patterns that are not obvious day to day. Ushiyama urged people to check those maps and understand the risks around their homes, workplaces, schools, and regular routes. During extreme rain, even a short drive can become dangerous if water begins moving quickly across a road. The deaths in Chiba are a painful reminder that climate-related risks are not only about major storms at the coastline or dramatic riverbanks. Sometimes the danger forms in ordinary places, where a small slope and heavy rain combine faster than people expect. Better local knowledge, clear warnings, and safer evacuation decisions can save lives. Follow for a daily world brief. Sources are linked in the description.
That's the world as